in order to develop a framework for market monitoring of shelter and NFI materials in key urban centers. And then we had also discussion with WAS to join this initiative, since some of the items are common, mainly the construction materials. So Shelter Cluster, WAS Cluster, and REACH came together and developed a TOR, and after several discussions, which was also impacted, in fact, by COVID-19. And then finally, we managed to have our first joint market monitoring this year in August. So I'm going to present the process also, and also the findings of this joint market monitoring. Before we go into main contents, I want to give you some general information about cash-based programming in Somalia. So if we look at 2020 HRP, 1/3 of total requirement is like 332 million, about, was planned through cash and voucher assistance, which is quite significant. Multipurpose cash, food and shelter represent 84% of the total amount. So you can see the shelter has a significant proportion of the cash and voucher assistance planned. For the shelter cluster specifically, 84%, 16 of 19 have a cash component. 64% of total HRP requirement of the cluster was planned through cash and voucher, The activities that partners planned through CPA are distribution of non-food items, emergency shelter assistance, and transitional shelter assistance. As I mentioned earlier, this joint market monitoring initiative, it is a joint initiative of REACH, shelter, and WAS clusters. So basically, when it comes to our responsibility within this joint market monitoring initiative, for us, we agreed together on the items and frequency for this monitoring. And then shelter and WAS clusters also identified partners in key urban centers across Somalia who were given responsibility to collect the market-related data in the field. And REACH helped with the development of tools, training to the partners, cleaning the data, analyzing the data, interpreting the data, and preparing the fact sheets. So that is how the division of responsibilities in terms of JMMI were. We selected 12 locations and agreed to have this market monitoring every 3 months. The locations were selected based on the market routes, but also on where the response is, and also the presence of partners. So those were the key parameters that we used to select the locations. And the CAS expert with UNICEF and REACH helped us to identify these locations based on their analysis. But of course, we also consulted our subnational focal points. We included 53 items, which is a lot, in the monitoring. and they were like divided into 3 categories: household items, construction items, and water. The first comprehensive assessment, as I mentioned earlier, took place in August, and 18 cluster partners participated in this data collection. For some locations, there were more than 1 partner actually. The fact sheet booklet has been published about a week ago, and the link of this document is here, which I think Renee also shared in her email last week, so you can access this document. When you look at the price of the monitored items, this is how it looks like in the document, and you see all the items and the description. Description is not complete here. I mean, we have provided a specification, and that specification is mentioned in the TOR, but here we cannot include everything because of the limitation of the space. And then the price that you see is the median price. For example, blanket, you see $7 in Somalia. And then the first quarter and third quarter is the first quarter is the like bottom 25% of the median price, and the third quarter is the last median price of this item. And the price we have here is the in between. The median price, what was collected in different locations. And as I mentioned earlier, there were 53 items altogether. So when you look at the fact sheets that have been developed, what we have are number 1, price. So the median price is available for those items in all 12 locations. In some locations, since it was a first survey, market survey, there were issues with some of the items in some locations, and for those, the median data from surrounding districts were considered. But we have this price for all items for each location. Availability of those items in those areas, payment method, whether the vendors accept cash or mobile payment or both, currency of the payment, the duration that the current stock lasts, restocking time, and barriers. So these are the key components that you will find in the document for all 12 locations, but also a summary. The issues and challenges that we have faced, that since this was a first survey, those partners who have not done like such kind of survey before, and there were also changes in a couple of locations because the persons who were trained left. So we feel that there is a need for additional trainings and more support to the partners. And next week we'll be having a meeting with all the partners who participated to see how we can improve this overall process, but also what support we provide to them in order to have like improved data collection in the field. Due to COVID-19, partners were not able to interview vendors in person. So the selection, interview, everything was done online or through phone calls. I mean, so that is not the best way of collecting this kind of data, especially the first time. So we hope in future, where situation stabilizes or situation allows, partners will be able to collect this information in person, and that we hope also helps to establish relationship with the vendors. This is what I already mentioned. Then when data was collected and sent to REACH, in some locations, there was need to have more clarifications. And then when there was a follow-up calls with vendors, some vendors were not available. So this is also something what affected the quality of the product. But we hope that with the additional trainings and follow-up, we should be able to have more data for the next round. Some of the items, for example, say solar light, there are like different qualities and the brands available in the market. So we had like a large range of price. And when it comes to specifications, not all the partners are technical, partner staffs are technical people, and it's very difficult to also to really check and assess the quality of those items. So it was a bit difficult to standardize those items. The markets that we selected, or that were selected, as I said, 12 across the country were main urban markets. But then, of course, we have also responses in rural areas. And it may not be representative when it comes to price or availability, especially for rural areas. So that's all from my end. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, happy to hear and answer. Thank you. Over to you, Rene.
All right, thank you very much, Pankaj. Maybe so we can turn it over to questions. So I'm not seeing any initial hands, but maybe while we wait for hands, maybe you could say a bit more about how this market monitoring is informing your decision about response modalities and how it's making your processes as a cluster and as operational partners more efficient, and how it's different from maybe previous years when you didn't have this joint market monitoring.
Okay, thank you, Rene. So what we have planned together with REACH is in the next Shelter Cluster meeting, REACH will orient partners, because some of the findings that are analyzed and presented in the document are technical. And some of the partners may not find it or may not be able to interpret and use. So we have agreed with REACH that in the next Shelter Cluster meeting, they'll orient partners so that partners are to understand what has been presented and able to interpret the findings. That's number one. Number two is that this will help the cluster partners in order to determine the response modality. Of course, there are a number of other aspects such as user preference and the protection risks associated with the CVA. But then, of course, one of the main things that we consider we should go for cash-based or cash and voucher-based assistance or in kind is the functionality of the market and the price and all. So this will certainly help partners in determining the response modality in terms, and then also in terms of planning, because they know now the price of the materials. So when they submit a proposal, for example, to a donor, or even for this upcoming HRP projects, or to SHF. Now, when they calculate the cost of the kit, it's more realistic. It's not something as an indicative price what we have in our guidelines, for example, $100 for NFI kit, but that's very indicative, and it varies from location to location. But this fact sheet will help or will guide partners in order to determine the more realistic cost. And when they submit the proposal, if approved, they don't need to they don't need to go for example, revisions, or it doesn't deviate too much from the actual cost. So these are, and this market monitoring is also a kind of to show to the partners, to donors, that yes, market-based programming is feasible. It has been happening, but it's like a kind of evidence to say that, okay, this market-based programming is feasible in Somalia in these locations. For some locations where the cost is high, partners can also use this as an evidence to show that in these locations, based on this market assessment, the cost of items are high for this region. So they are able to also kind of convince or put an evidence to what they mention or what they put in the proposal. Over to you, and I stop here. Thank you.
Great. And then there's one last question quickly, and then before we hand over to the next speaker. So Tanya, do you want to ask your question out loud, or did Pankaj answer it already?
Thank you. Thanks, Pankaj. You kind of answered a lot. I just have a question. Do you have a standardized NFI package, or do you have different options for different vulnerable groups, or does each partner decide on their own NFI package? Thank you. Over.
Okay, thank you for the question, Tanya. We have a standard NFI kit, and we have a document called NFI kit guidelines, which includes like process, considerations before distribution, after distribution, and then the standardized kit with an indicative price of 100 USD. I hope I answered your question.
Great, thank you. All right, thank you, Pankaj. Now, and we can ask some more questions at the end if there's time. Also, we'll be uploading already. I shared with you in the chat the link to the fact sheets that they produced with REACH. So now we'll continue on the theme of market monitoring, this time over to Christopher to talk about the market assessment that was done for Cyclone Idai, and I'll also share that study in the chat, but I'll allow him to present first. Over to you.
Thanks, Renee. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Pankaj. Thanks, Renee, for the introduction. My name is Chris Reichert, and I'm part of the Humanitarian Response Department within CRS. I'm joined with a couple other members from the HRD, including Seki with Shelter and Jenny with Markets. So last year, CRS had the pleasure of working with the Mozambique Shelter Cluster to coordinate the emergency market assessment for the Idai cyclone response. And today we are pleased to present some of the content from that report. So we will quickly cover the assessment's background and methods, and then try and spend a bit more time on the key findings and recommendations. In March of 2019, 1.5 million people were affected by the cyclone. Across 4 provinces, an estimated 240,000 homes were affected. Of those, half were destroyed completely, and the other half partially destroyed. Through a rapid market assessment, the government of Mozambique and its partners wanted to better understand critical market chains. This report assessed the capacity of markets to supply key inputs to affected populations across 2 provinces and 8 local markets. And the assessment looked at 3 different value chains: timber, poles, and bamboo. The assessment included qualitative and quantitative methods. The qualitative portion included 44 key informant interviews with 5 different entities. Interviews were held with government, multilateral institutions, NGOs, vendors, and communities. The quantitative portion used a structured survey through COBO to collect information from nearly 100 vendors on 30 variables across 4 different domains. Those domains were vendor and client profiles, vendor payment options and terms, current stock levels, and pricing data. Pricing data was further divided into current retail prices, wholesale prices, and pre-EDA pricing to better understand the impact of the disaster on markets. The first step was to create a projection of the needs, the value chains based on a set of variables and assumptions. And a lit review helped classify needs into 3 different typologies: conventional homes, mixed homes, and traditional homes. The assessment also took into account variables such as self-recovery rates and shifts in typologies. For example, it was known that some % of traditional homes would be rebuilt into conventional homes. This led us to assume that support would be needed for about 180,000 households, of which 130 would be conventional, 20 mixed, and 30 traditional. Then we extrapolated it out to figure out how much of the inputs we would need, and this turned out to be about 60,000 cubes of timber, 1.5 million poles, and just over 2 million bamboo sticks. Just for a bit of perspective, a 30-ton truck can carry enough timber for 100 households. So just to meet the need on timber, we were looking at nearly 2,000 truckloads to meet the need. In general, the assessed vendor profile is dominated by informal merchants, cash business, low stock levels, poor storage practices, and vendor-centric payment terms. For example, almost all wanted 100% prepayment. All studied market chains items were found in the markets, but in varying levels of quality and quantity. Markets off the main interprovincial axis had negative quantities and inferior qualities. Now this photo here highlights the storage conditions, quality, and supply at that point in time. Here we can see this retail vendor is selling 2nd and 3rd tier quality wood from Ifloma, which is the main pine source. And they were selling these inferior qualities at a fairly high cost. Ifloma is the main integrated pine timber player in the affected area and is essentially a monopoly. They focus on production, value addition, exploration and licensing, and consumer retail. The company maintains a sawmill, kiln, and treatment facilities and manages a large swath of land covering 31,000 hectares. Although supply is plentiful, processing was capped at about 30 cubes per day. This production is a bit more than 1 30-ton truck a day, or the equivalent of about 90 conventional houses. At this rate, total timber needs would only be met in 5.5 years. As expected, prices were commensurate with distance from Ifloma. By plotting price versus distance from Ifloma along with various timber sizes, we can visualize this relationship. Aside from pricing implications and processing ability, the report assessed current stock. Vendors' current total stock was estimated at about 50,000 items, half in timber, a quarter in poles, and a quarter in bamboo. Current timber stocks would yield enough for about 500 households, poles for 180 households, and bamboo for about 85 households. Stockouts and delays were common unless prepayments of shipments were made well in advance. Although beyond the scope of the assessment, indicative data was collected on fuel needs for burnt brick production. It takes about 2 tons of large girth, mature wood to make 20,000 bricks for 3 homes. For this one area visited, that would mean about 2,000 tons of wood would be needed to fire blocks for about 4,000 families. The area visited was also adjacent to a forest reserve, which had already seen drastic impacts from wood cutting. A company called Levis Floor has a large sustainable forest concession near one of the national parks. Levis Floor manages blocks in 2 districts, harvesting 1 block per year, only returning to that block 20 years later. The level of rigor appears high as they are one of the only FSC certified institutions, that's the Forest Stewardship Council. GPS of every felled tree can be provided. Commercial production was about 8,000 cubes, of which about 70% is a wood called miombo. Although having greater sawing capacity and sustainability advantages, cost and demand may be factors for us to consider. Levis's average cost per cube was nearly 3 times that of Floma, and also communities view miombo as firewood and charcoal, and not really see it as construction timber. Before we go into the top 10 recommendations on the last 2 slides, let's focus a little bit on modalities. The cluster should consider a mixed approach for meeting the timber, pole, and bamboo needs by layering in various modalities, and these which would include cash, such as conditional cash, voucher pilots, along with local, regional, and international in-kind purchases. First, the market for timber was very, very thin, suggesting that large-scale surge demand could be met only by in-kind support. Assuming that if Floma could increase their processing, the centralized nature of the monopoly actually provides an opportunity for quality control and a certain amount of economies of scale, especially for those in distant communities. However, in-kind distributions would not support local markets, and most of the major players were using in-kind distributions for the emergency and transitional phases, which meant they had a lot more experience with this modality. Second, although there was interest in working with vouchers by formal vendors, there was very little experience. Formal vendors held reservations on payment. Some highlighted that previous experience led to cash flow issues as payments were made very late by certain entities. Although monitoring would be relatively easier than, say, the cash modalities, it would exclude informal vendors. Finally, the study highlighted that cash should also be considered as an option available to partners. A cash modality is likely to better match individual needs with supply, emphasizing choice, support local markets, and especially support small vendors. Although a few pilots had been done locally, there was far less experience with this type of approach. Some people expressed concerns around quality control, and others felt that we could manage this through technical assistance or conditionalities. Now let's turn to the last 2 slides, and this is a summation of the recommendation. Number 1, due to transport and logistic demands, bulk orders from Floma make fiscal and logistical sense at a certain tipping point, which ranges from 50 to 100 households, depending on household size. Number 2, larger scale responses will need close collaboration with Floma to ensure demand can be met. Relying on local market actors for large amounts of pine is just not feasible. 3, consider piloting a shopper kit voucher program. Establish multi-branch retail stores. Start with those homes closest to the retailer and provide transport support through cash. Retailers' concerns on timely payment will need to be addressed. Number 4, quality control of timber will be a crucial component with any of these modalities. The markets contain a variety of qualities, including 2nd and 3rd tier pine sold from Floma. That said, if lower quality pine cuts are options from a technical point of view, this may be a way to reduce input costs considerably. 5, of the 3 market chains assessed, bamboo is the best candidate for a market-based response, especially for those areas that A, habitually use bamboo, and B, those that live closest to the bamboo sources. This cash injection would support disposable income to those in the value chain and also reduce the logistical complications for partners. Number 6, consider market support activities such as increased sawing capacity and supporting local vendors with storage capacity and methods. Number 7, during distributions, provide education to beneficiaries on choosing materials, particularly around input quality and end user storage. Number 8, consider a larger environmental impact study focused on burnt bricks prior to designing programs with this input. Number 9, continue to conduct light interagency market assessments that draw upon the strengths of each agency to help with ideations and solutions. And finally, support decision makers in how to balance key factors. These key factors will be environmental costs, price, and the opportunity costs associated with timely supervision and the humanitarian imperative. Thanks for this opportunity to share a bit about the market assessment. The assessment report and summary documents can be found on the Mozambique Shelter Cluster site. With that, back over to you, Renee.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the presentation from the audience? So, Carolina, do you want to ask your question out loud?
Hi, thank you very much for this presentation. I was just wondering, because you said the bamboo is the material the most advised, and I was wondering if you know if there is any bamboo treatment facility, if the bamboo is treated, and how does it change the price of it?
Thanks for the question, Carolina. Yeah, at that time, that question was actually on our research tools, and no, we did not find any treated bamboo in the markets. And we did not know of any bamboo being treated. So I guess that would affect the price if people started to treat the bamboo.
Okay, and are you still advising though to use bamboo when it's not treated, or do you know also if the timber is treated?
Sure. So the bamboo was really only recommended in a subset of typologies. So that, I think it was on the second slide, it showed the number of traditional homes that would be targeted, which was a small fraction of the total need. And there was some pressure, I think, from both the cluster and other members in the cluster to shift people from, quote, traditional typologies to more conventional typologies, which then this would mean less bamboo. But for those that were going to still use bamboo, the idea was that cash would be a plausible modality for those communities. In terms of timber, some of the timber was treated, and that timber was mostly from the imported timber from South Africa. But that was a small portion of the total amount of timber on the market. Most of the timber came from Ifloma, most of it was not treated, nor was it kiln dried.
So any other questions before we move to the next presentation?
Maybe if I may, I can just add a little piece of information to what Christopher just said for Mozambique. Basically, we use the bamboo for the emergency and more transitional shelters, and then for the permanent reconstruction, as Christopher mentioned, we were trying to promote more durable materials, given that the bamboo wasn't treated, and it was also quite time consuming or difficult to do the treatment, like by the agencies who purchased the bamboo. They could have done the treatment, but that would have even made it more complicated. So basically the bamboo was mostly used for emergency and transitional shelter. Thank you. Over and out.
So any other questions on the presentation? Okay, so I have been asked by the colleagues in Yemen to share the presentation for them, and then they will just remark to me when is the next. Oh, so Joseph, do you want to say? So this, yeah, we have linked to the Good Distribution Practice training on the website already, so you can see that on the NFI working group page. But perhaps if there's time at the end, we can say more. Let me just check the name of the, yes. Okay, so now I'm sharing the presentation from the colleagues in Yemen. And over to you, Igor.
Yes, good morning, colleague. My name is Igor Ashantefor, cluster coordinator for Yemen, and I will be joined by Badar, who is the technical advisor of the cluster. I will firstly apologize because in Yemen we have a very bad internet connectivity, and I was already dropped out twice. I'm not like in a place where I can get access to internet easily. That means if suddenly I'm disappearing, I will ask you patience, time that I'm connecting with another Wi-Fi. Yep. just I wanted to get, so that is more like an experience sharing that we are going to present to you. I will make the opening remark, and then Badar will discuss more about his experience as coordinating the technical working group. As you may know, Yemen is a protected emergency for officially with cluster 8 years, but even more on it. We have last year 7.5 million, but we had 500,000 more population of concern for the shelter cluster for this year due to the very high level of floods. Due to the fact that shelter cluster is a very old cluster, we have a lot of members. 160 members is huge, but taking account that means we have 20 international and 140 is national, and sometimes they are working only on one city. We are going to speak about the non-food item, and I was mentioning like 140,000 households is more or less what we have on the scope of work for this year. This figure is still increasing, and that is not the need, is what we are capable to answer. Our needs are 4 to 5 times more, but due to the funding reasons, due to that Yemen is one of the worst humanitarian crises, we have always to update the needs, the projection of needs, and our response. Well, many partners are involved in NFI. And one of the main issues is when you have a lot of partners is to be sure that means they receive a financial support to proceed with distribution. When we arrive, we start to get sort of état des lieux. That means we are looking, and we had a huge discrepancy in terms of quality and cost. And when I say huge quantity, is not 20%. We are speaking that certain items were bought for less quality, more than double that's what was the right price identified by the shelter cluster. We had during all these years many guidelines, but these guidelines were a bit theoretical, and when you had a small organization working with a volume of 500 non-food items purchased on local markets or with an equivalent with vouchers, the price variation compared to what is feasible and what is the right price on a global level from a stockpile, we spoke sometime about 200 to 300 times 200% what was the price. That means we had a big problem with the quality and the quantity, and that was triggering the change that we initiate and that we are going to discuss and to look more into detail. And a last point that I would like to say, we had a very different parallel system. That means so we had the shelter cluster contingency stock with something very classical, if I can say like this, with some partners handling for shelter cluster, some stocks, and with warehouse located all around Yemen. But OCHA was requesting IOM to create some contingency stocks were not full kits, were a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of wash, a bit of shelter, a bit of fuel, and that was generating also some many misunderstanding about who should answer. And also we had the problem that the small organizations are struggling to compose complete kits. That means many times organizations say, okay, we assist this population in these districts, but we didn't give the complete kit. And we are speaking not only small organization, it was going all the time, some partners from international partners who are not specialized in shelters, but who are doing some work on it. Next slide, please. Okay, that means what we did, that means we were looking a bit how we can improve the general system, because all these ad hoc initiatives and parallel initiatives were definitely detrimental for the beneficiaries, and it was very far to be cost effective. And because we were anticipating a cost reduction, because just to keep an idea, like last year in 2019, the HRP for Yemen was $3.5 billion. Shelter was a very small component, the main component food, but to give you the impact of the HRP, and we say like last February. That means it will be impossible to keep the same level of fundraising. That means we were anticipating some serious fund reductions, and as a sectors, we had to enter on a very drastic, cost-effective way. That means what we did with 3 points. Firstly, we start as a shelter cluster to introduce a warehouse reconciliation report. That means all the key organizations are reporting all the items and their warehouse. That is to get a general idea about the stock level and capable sometimes to make some referral between organizations. The second one is that was in June. We started to introduce the concept or to get a common pipeline in order to ensure the quality of the item, the cost efficiency, and also to get a clarity in terms of procurement. Some of the items has to be internationally procured because Yemen is not producing them, and the market is done by 2 or 3 families monopolizing everything. That means, and so other items are locally produced. That means definitely these items has to be safeguarded, and we have to definitely to advocate for them. That means we had to introduce this notion and these concepts between sort of a rational way to organize the general supply, and that we did with the document on a common pipeline that I can share if you are interested. And the last point, it was this unexpected flooding that we had from almost May to September, with an extra 500,000 individuals topping up suddenly on our to-do list, and we were also using that to change also the practices in terms of how to release stocks, and is why I was mentioning the hashtag 72 hours response is all the shelter cluster partners who are deciding to enter and to try to pair, and sometimes partners distributing goods procured by other organizations. Means shelter cluster was playing the role of operational coordination through the subnationals. That was more or less to give you the broad idea, and what is really important is all these 3 steps were feasible if we were in parallel conducting a serious reconsideration of our kit composition, and is why Bada is coming into the pictures, because he will tell you a bit more how the NFI kits were changed and what was the adjustments. Over to you, Badar. No, sorry, there's another one. And yeah, and that a common pipeline is one thing that I wanted to show you on a common pipeline. That was how we reorganize the pipeline. We had to define the roles. When we say define the roles, is to know what are the limitations in terms of mandate. Some organizations are working only with one specific population of concern, and that means we had to redistribute the role, who is acting as a last resort. That was one of the difficulty during the negotiation. The second one was to get the type of functions. That means what to initiate with all the big organization to know how we can reorganize. That means we made a list of functions, and we try to look who has a capacity. And then after that, the last part of the document is an estimation of the needs. That means in terms of a projection, not only on 1 year, but on a 3-year base, to try to anticipate and say volume of goods that we have to get it in terms of non-food items and the shelter. And yeah, I think we can pass to the next slides. And that is to Badar now.
Yeah, thank you, Igor, and greetings to all colleagues. My name is Badar Abdullah. I'm the focal person, technical focal person, and the technical working group lead for the shelter and NFIs in the shelter cluster Yemen operation. I joined the mission in the beginning of this year, end of January, beginning of February. Just to give you a bit an overview, then we activated the technical working groups in the beginning of March this year. And then our first meeting started in April. And you can imagine in April it was lockdown most of the countries in the world because of the pandemic. So our meetings were more or less virtual meetings. And yeah, then we started our meeting in April. There was a technical working group before this year. I mean, there was a technical working group for the shelter and NFIs in 2018 and 2019. And they have done some incredible job in Yemen also. They have done a lot of surveys. They did some like they have used methodology for interviewing like house to house level interviews on some of the beneficiaries and displaced people. They have done some focal group discussion, and there was a technical working group both on shelter and NFIs. So they also did some technical work at their level, but because of some change of the leadership of the shelter cluster also, some of their work was not really effective and did not become like on ground applied. So just to come back to my role, when we activated these technical working groups for the shelter and NFIs, we did not ignore, what has been done before. So we have taken, because it was a pandemic, we were not able to do all these, like again going back and conduct all these surveys, but we have considered the feedback from the beneficiaries. And we also had a discussion on the technical working group level on the partners. So why we actually did revision on the first slide, why we were actually doing these technical working groups, mainly because Yemen is a very diverse country and very big. It has southern and northern part. The southern part is a bit more hot and very desert. And in the northern part, it's a bit more cold. Maybe most of the people who have not come in Yemen can imagine that, like they may think, including myself, it was my very first time reaching Yemen end of January. I was expecting that it will be a very desert country, and it's a typical Gulf Arabian country. And it was really cold. It was really cold, around 9 to 7 degrees. So in the northern part it's a bit cold, and in the southern part it's very hot. So initially we had one fit all model type of NFIs, one NFI package that we were distributing throughout the country, whether it is hot, whether it is cold, in near the seashore, and some area are also some hilly areas. So we did not really had a customized version of NFIs and even the shelter. So we were actually very much interested to move from this one fit all model to a more basic kit, and also getting a bit of options. For example, having some basic kit of NFI, but if it is a winter, then we have a winterization top up. If it is a summer, we have a summerization top up, and also have some bedding within the bigger NFI package. So why we were doing this? Because it will give actually flexibility to according to the needs, also in the geographical location and the family composition. It also gives a cost saving because you don't really need to give high thermal, for example, blanket when the weather is really hot in the southern part and some of the areas near the seashore, which is the temperature is quite high. So we actually wanted to have a bit of options on based on the geographical area and the needs. And next, please. Yeah, the strategy that we have used it for revising these NFIs, the main thing was beneficiary feedback from different organizations. Okay, as we know that every organization does BDM also, both distribution monitoring, and there is always some recommendations coming from the beneficiary. So we wanted to actually collect all that beneficiary feedback, and because they are the end users, we wanted to put them in the center of our need, and we were considering that. Also, we considered their feedback on our last year and before last year feedback on their request on the NFI, what they want to see. And there was a lot of items, shopping list and very long, you will probably see. Then standard NFI kit composition, the one that we currently have and that we want to move from is only these 5 items that you see: kitchen set, mattresses, blanket, water bucket and sleeping mat, and it's a plastic sleeping mat. For example, this is a plastic sleeping mat. A lot of people in the hot areas like Hudaydah and other parts of northern part and even in the south, people are not using the sleeping mat from the plastic hot season. Why? Because it becomes very hot and they don't feel comfortable sitting on it. So when you give them, a lot of them or some of them at least, were selling them and getting a local one made of material called khazaf in the local in Arabic and in the local Arabic language. It's called khazaf, and it's made of palm trees, and it gives like it's the same as the one they are sitting, I mean the sleeping mat that we have, but in a very local material, and it's more appropriate in the hot season. So while we were doing actually revising the NFIs, for example, we have included in the summarization item to have a sleeping mat made of khazaf, which will probably create an opportunity for the local people who are going to produce those type of items, and also give a better option and appropriate solution for people in the hot areas. So we also have used the strategy of receiving, the NFI distribution protocol. We have revised it. I mean, we have reviewed the NFI distribution protocol. For example, how many items for each and every, we have this standard package. For example, in the blanket and the mattresses, we had like 7 for each. And some of the organizations were having an issue on the 7. So because to store, the mattresses were quite big, and to store them is not really very convenient, carrying them and all that. So some of the BOCs or the beneficiaries, they were not really like some of them or some of the organizations have witnessed that when we provide them, they were selling them on the site and maybe replacing with other things. So we have looked into that and somehow reduced the size of the distribution protocol, meaning from 7 to downsize it to 5. We also looking into the price, the cost, the procurement, whether it is international or locally available. We have looked at, the add-ons on the summarization and also the winterization items. Can you say next, please? Okay, as you can see from this slide, we have created this new NFI kit composition. This was the output of all our meetings. We have subdivided, our traditional NFI package into 4 subcategory. One was the basic NFI, which we have to give like all time. Under this basic NFI, you can see these 4 items, and we have bedding with these items, summarization and winterization also. So we have introduced all these items that you can see the list of the right side of the slide. And the summary of this slide gives down here. The current NFI budget was 177, and the new NFI budget become around 387. The current NFI was 5 items, and we move it to 13 items. Revised NFIs, we have 7 items to be locally procured and 6 to be international procured. How we come this? Through discussion on the technical working groups, the subnational clusters that we have, different governorates in Yemen, in southern and northern part. They have done rapid need assessment, market assessment, if these items are available locally or not. If they are available locally, are they available according to the standard and specifications in the shelter cluster? So a lot of items were not really available. Most of the items that are available, the local items that we come up as a summarization and winterization and bedding items. So this was according to the finding that we have received. And the price increased a bit, but we mind you that we are not going to distribute this NFI package, which has 385 USD, for example, all the time. So we are only going to give basic NFI with the winterization or maybe with the summarization items, and sometimes with the bedding. So when we look into, we have also done a separate budget on each and every sub-item, subdivision of this NFI kit composition. And when we actually add up when we add up 2 or 3 of the items, it's almost equal to these 177 to 200 items. Next, okay, next slide, please. Okay, main publications that we have done as a NFI technical working group. New NFI kit composition, specification, price, and quantities. That's what we have produced and we have published in the website. It's available in Yemen Shelter Cluster website. NFI market assessment form that we have revised it in the technical working group. Also, NFI technical working group meeting minutes, they are all available in the website. Revised NFI BDM guideline we had already, but we have revised it according to the latest changes. NFI technical working report also produced, but it's under review with the SAG members. So it will be published probably in this week. Constraints. It was a virtual technical working group meetings due to the COVID-19, so it was not really face-to-face. It was a bit of challenge worldwide. Distribution during the pandemic period was also a bit of challenge, although we had a guideline, but there was some lessons learned during the distribution, keeping this 1.5 meter distance and all that. However, in some areas, in the remote areas of Hajj, for example, we were receiving some feedback from colleagues in the field that some of the beneficiaries were not really very comfortable even wearing the face masks, for example. But and they believe that it will also contaminate them, and maybe the face mask itself is carrying the virus. So, and it was not really a bit easy to convince them. So we at least kept it the 1.5 to 2 meter minimum distance to make sure that they also remain safe, and all the enumerators and the staff of the agents were wearing the PPE. And also all the shelter partners are aware and get the distribution guideline for the pandemic period. Technical working group discussions. Apart from the NFI technical working group meetings, we were doing sub-national cluster coordinators, which are the focal person for the different governorates in Yemen. We actually engaged them on the outputs of the discussion. Ad hoc meetings with the shelter and NFI partners also, as the need come, we have done several ad hoc meetings. Local authority discussions also on the findings. Also presenting the outcome of the meeting to the SAG members. Over. In case of questions, we can take it. Over to you.
But I will take many questions because it looks like that is an avalanche of questions.
Maybe I can just provide some order as we go back. Usually, I can see that some people are already starting some parallel chats, which is great. So many thanks, Igor and Badar, for that interesting presentation. I'm going to also ask, maybe after the meeting, to both of you if you could share the links on your website and also share some of those stock report templates. I know that that's very interesting for a lot of our country level clusters and also for a lot of our agencies here. Actualized to context, so we like to keep all that in a repository on our website, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. So I wanted to back up because I see there's quite a lot of questions in the chat. Tanya, did you want to ask your question out loud and maybe then Igor can answer?
Thanks, Renee. I already got an answer. Thank you so much, Igor.
Okay.
Renee, if I don't want to intervene and to oversee it, but maybe I read all the chats during Badar, and I can maybe summarize because we had a lot of things to say, and we had a very short shorter frame for the intervention. But there is many questions related to the relation with cash, and I fully understand. And I will give a bit more insight about why and what is the relation with cash. We have an active cash working group, and as shelter clusters in Yemen, we have a lot of money going with cash, mainly with cash for rents and cash with winterization, with like a monetization of the assistance. But I would like you to keep in mind that once we have a two level of intervention, because it's a huge crisis, and we're speaking about now around 8 million of population of concern. That means we have what we call the regular activities, is more or less what is programmed with cash, and all the problem related with contingency. Is not on 1 week when we don't have maybe 10 or 15 referral about the flood displacements on this district, on all these districts. That is, compared to other clusters, we are all time on our edge, on our foot, in order to get the contingency, and that is making, maybe I would say broadly, maybe 75% of our coordination work. I mean, we deal with that, and we're speaking about people suddenly being in the streets, referral by the authorities. We not like something is happening and then you have to recover. We are systematically and week after week with another crisis, another crisis, another crisis. And that is changing the dynamics. That means we have to get the regular activities where we go with classical market survey, and that we are doing that we didn't make the emphasis today, where we are looking at the price, we have partners reporting the price, monitoring, and trying to get it is more a sort of working on the resilience when we have, because yesterday we had 5,000 families, that means with between 7 to 9 people per family, you can say like very quickly you can go for 10, 15, 20,000 people in the streets. We have to react on a contingency manner. And what we show with you is more how we strengthen the contingency. And then the monetization is still something that we are taking account, but we are looking what is available. When you have a region or a district with disconnected by floods, roads are cut, you cannot go with the classical, we are going to get a market surveys and we are going to provide, and maybe in 1 or 2 months we are going to get an assistance with vouchers. That is more like on the second part. When you're looking on contingency, is to get warehouse, is to know the stock of the warehouse, who can jump, who can go for the distribution, and to be capable or tic-tac response on it. Is why maybe that we didn't emphasize enough during the presentation, and that we were looking about how we are strengthening the contingency parts. That means we are not ignoring that the work with the market is indispensable, and we are doing that. For example, 90% of the winterization is a monetization, is 1 or 2 partners, and they prefer to go with winterization because they are capable to plan ahead. But the core part of the work is for us to be sure that means there is enough goods, because purely sometimes there is not good on the markets. We have this shortage, or certainly because we have a very monopolistic approach, certainly we have a problem to supply goods with a decent and the price. And I'm going back again also because we have we have a COVID, we have cholera, we have locusts, we have polio, we have a drought, we have hunger, and you name it. We don't have volcano and earthquake in Yemen. If not, it's just like a series of crises on top of each other. That means it's really forcing us to be back to the basic, if I can say like this, looking about to be sure to be capable to answer and to give the response, because if not, it will be good. Okay, I'm finishing, and it was just to wrap up all the question. Over. Great. And bye.
Thank you. So Mohammed, you still have your hand raised. I know you asked a question about cash and vouchers. Does that answer it?
Yeah, I think it was answered. I'm going to raise the hands. Thank you, colleagues from Yemen. I can see the crisis is a little bit similar to what's happening in Syria, and a lot of challenges and difficulties happening in the field. Yeah, that's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thanks. So let's move on to some other questions that were asked. Carolina asked one on how are you distributing clothing? I think Igor already answered the one on vouchers, but maybe maybe
No, I think
Badar
it's
or
fine.
Igor?
I know that the question is really complex and really difficult to reach the market. And I think probably clothing, it's really the exceptions. And as I saw it only at the end, it's like just the addition for the summarization or winterization. So it's okay. If I think it's a challenging one. So yeah, if it's through the cache, that makes sense. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Fadi, do you want to ask your question on durable shelter, summarization, and winterization instead of individual distributions?
Yes, thank you. My question for our colleagues in Yemen, why normally, I don't know if it is normal or not, they distribute individual NFIs instead of looking for more durable summarization and winterization solutions like using available insulation materials for shelter or where the people are living? My suggestion like that. Thank you.
You are totally right, and thank you for your question. But we have, as I mentioned, to compete with many other crises, cholera and others, is why sometimes this top up and to get the accent on the resilience, because for me that is linked to the resilience, is difficult to fundraise. We have some pilots, but we are not capable at this stage to go for large scale. That means we have recommendation. We have technical working group on a shelter for that, but for now we are still stuck, unfortunately, in emergency response, and that for the last 6 years is a concern, but is not only our call on it. Is also how donors can better support this type of activities. Over.
All right, thank you. So Jennifer, do you want to ask your question, or I think it's also the same on market monitoring?
Thanks, Renee. Yeah, I think Igor already covered it in his earlier response. Thanks.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions for the presentations or questions about the NFI working group or all right, since we are already over time, I want to thank everybody for their, there's a hand. Was there a hand? Did somebody raise a hand? Sorry, I'm not able to see the chat and the hands at the same time. Okay, so I wanted to thank everybody for their participation. As I mentioned, please, if you're interested in the NFI working group, please subscribe on our Shelter Cluster NFI working group page. That I already posted in the chat. All of the presentations that were shared today, we're going to be uploading them on our website on that same page. And then we send out notifications about best practices through that working group page. In terms of taking forward the training curriculum, that's part of our regular work plan. Right now, as I mentioned, we don't have many resources for that, but in terms of if you are interested in contributing resources, please contact Cecilia or myself, and we would be happy to take that forward further. So you can find out more by visiting Shelter Cluster NFI Practices Working Group page. And I'd like to thank everybody for their participation, and the Global Shelter Cluster meetings continue throughout the week, and you can also see that on the Global Shelter Cluster page. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.